Lowering your gaze makes you more masculine. One more time. Lowering your gaze makes you more masculine. And I'm referring specifically to lowering your gaze to the opposite sex. Now, instead of giving you the whole science behind it, or giving you a religious spiel, because some of you are not Muslim, some of you may not be religious, I'm going to give you my own personal experience. A story. Okay? A story that I have personally experienced myself. Let me put this light up. How do I adjust this light? It's a bit better. Okay, I'm going to take you back to 2013. 2013, I just finished my degree, just graduated, and I realized, oh crap, what am I going to do with this thing now? And that's when I decided to do a CELTA. A CELTA, for those of you who don't know, is, I don't remember what it stands for exactly, but it's a qualification that gives you the ability to teach English to foreign students, international students. So I completed my CELTA and I applied for a job in Saudi Arabia, and lo and behold, I got one with a company called edX, I believe. Great job, £2,500 a month, tax-free. Living costs in Saudi Arabia are really cheap. Like you can fund a family of 6, which is what I had, easily, comfortably on £600 a month. So basically you have $2,000 a month that you can save, right? Very, very attractive. Working hours were negligible, teaching 2 hours a day. So, it was an amazing job from that perspective. From a perspective of fulfillment, zero. I felt totally unfulfilled. But I got to live in Medina for a year, which is an experience in and of itself. Anyway, I digress. So I first went to Saudi Arabia on my own, okay? And I landed in Riyadh and I was transferred to Medina. And that's when I began my teaching there. Now, bear in mind, very important to know, that I've been married since I was 16. That means I have been sexually active since I was 16 years old, okay? This was the first time I had been away from my wife for any meaningful period whatsoever, okay? And literally 2 weeks into this, well, I can't really call it a trip, but 2 weeks into this experience, man started getting hot. Yeah, I was like flipping 2 weeks and I'm dying. How am I going to last a year out here? Because I didn't take my family to begin with. I went for a year on my own to save money and to establish myself on my own without the pressure of my family and having to worry about them before bringing them over. And after 2 weeks, I was dying. Okay? Anyway, we digress again. In Saudi Arabia, whether you've been there or not, you probably know the stereotype surrounding it, which is pretty accurate. Most of the women are covered, specifically in black, head to toe. Niqab is pretty much the norm. I'd say the vast majority of women wear niqab in Saudi Arabia, specifically in the 2 holy cities as well, Medina and Mecca. Less so in Riyadh, but Medina and Mecca, pretty much everyone is head to toe in black. So you don't see women, period, full stop. Like if you see even a bit of skin, it's like, whoa, like it really hits you hard. You don't see women in Saudi Arabia. So I spent 4 months there. It got to January time and finally I had permission to take a week leave so I could come back to the UK to see my family. Now you need to understand, 4 months I was in Saudi Arabia. I didn't have my wife with me. And I hadn't seen a female in that whole time. Any women that we did see, they were dressed in head to toe in black. So you can't see the shape of a woman. You definitely can't see her face. So there's zero exposure to the opposite sex in that regard. So I get my flight back to the UK, and to save money, I chose a transit flight through Egypt. Now, the flight from Saudi Arabia to Egypt, I think it was around an hour or so, hour and a half. I get off the plane and I enter the airport. I've got a 6-hour stay there. And the first thing that I notice is how profound an impact the perfume ad had on me. Now, before I get to that, even the advertisements in Saudi Arabia in the mall, if it's an advertisement of a woman wearing a certain attire, her face is blurred out. And her body is blurred out. So you can only really see the clothing, but you can't see her form or her face. So I land in Egypt, and the first thing I see is an advertisement for a particular perfume bottle. I forget what it was now. I think it was YSL. I think it was. And of course, there was a female modeling the perfume. And I will never forget how profound an impact seeing this woman, quite sexualized female, how profound an impact it had on me. It was like, whoa, what have I just seen? Like I've never seen a woman before, and suddenly the veil has been revealed and I'm looking at a woman. It's like, whoa. And no cap, things were firing off left and right inside me. I was going to say it as it is. Like, it was like, wow. My arousal levels were so, is it low or high? Low. I was very easily aroused, extremely easily aroused, because my sensitivity was extremely low, meaning it didn't take much at all to arouse me, because I had been deprived of seeing a woman for so long. Now, before you start making your judgments, just let me finish the story. This is not the punchline. I haven't got to the punchline yet. I take the flight from Egypt to the UK, and I'm noticing the same thing again. Advertisements of women, provocatively clad women in their beautiful attire and so on. You can see their shape and their curves. And that's like having such an impact on me. I couldn't help but notice it so profoundly. And this experience continued for, I'd say, 2 or 3 days. My first 2 or 3 days in the UK, where I was really noticing women. I was really sensitive towards the opposite sex. And then after 3 days, that feeling began to wear off, and I became desensitized. It's very important here. I became desensitized. Now, as a Muslim man, I am someone who lowers my gaze regardless, right? But as all Muslim men should do. But you can't help but be exposed to what you're exposed to. You go out in the street, you see the billboards, you see the bus stop thing, advertisement. You can't help but see what you see. So you do become desensitized. But what I will say is this, where I'm taking this is the following. If you're living in the West, you can't help but see what you see outside. You cannot replicate the environment of Saudi Arabia. But if you lower your gaze, your woman, your wife, will be the most beautiful woman in the world to you. She can be built like a brick house, like a whale. If you're not looking at any other woman, you're consciously turning away, lowering your gaze. Believe me, your wife looks incredible, like a supermodel. Like a supermodel. And isn't that what every woman wants? To feel desired in that way? The extreme version of not doing this is pornography. And a lot of people who have, particularly men, who have a pornography / masturbation addiction, but let's stick with the pornography here. Those who have a pornography addiction, they tend to also have erectile dysfunction. Now, erectile dysfunction is a physical manifestation. It's a physical problem. It's where your penis cannot hold itself erect for any meaningful period of time. And if you now, people often treat erectile dysfunction with medication, Viagra, for example. But this is wrong, particularly if your erectile dysfunction has manifested itself as a result of a pornography addiction. Because now the issue is not physical. There's nothing wrong with your testosterone. There's nothing wrong with your biochemical makeup, nothing at all. It's all up here. What has happened is this. Those porn movies that you've seen that have depicted such unrealistic depictions of how a woman should conduct herself in the bedroom. Now your arousal level is right up here. It takes a ton for you to be aroused. You need to see that perfect looking bikini body, massive breasted, giant booty, thing, alien. It's not even realistic how she looks, doing all the things that she does in order for you to be aroused. And then you come back home to your wife, or if you're in a relationship with your girlfriend, and you're looking at her and she's looking pretty plain Jane to you. She's looking pretty plain Jane. Now that's at the extreme level, pornography, okay? But people don't just wake up one day and have a pornography addiction. It starts from somewhere. Where does it start? It starts with not lowering your gaze and looking, peeking, prolonging the stare, looking at members of the opposite sex in a sexual manner. Now, a lot of therapists or relationship coaches or whatever you want to call it will say there's nothing wrong with looking. It's harmless. What's the big deal? Pornography is fine. It's harmless. You're not hurting anyone. No. There is everything wrong with it. If that thing opens the gates, the doors which could lead to something harmful, which at the extreme end is cheating on your spouse, less so erectile dysfunction and other cognitive issues. Erectile dysfunction is typically a cognitive issue. It's very rare that is a physical issue. Then that thing becomes prohibited, period. You shouldn't do it. And I'm trying not to make this a religious spiel because yes, I am Muslim. My faith, my beliefs are grounded in my religion. My religion says, lower your gaze. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Tell the believing men to lower their gaze. وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ. And to protect their private parts. Notice how Allah says, lower your gaze first. And then protect your privates. Why is that? Because nobody wakes up and says, right, I want to go and commit adultery, fornication with so-and-so today. No, it starts with a gaze. It starts with a look. Allah is most wise. So lower your gaze first. Then you'll be able to protect your privates. But regardless, this thing, it can lead to something bad, really bad. That so-called harmless stare, that harmless look, it can lead to somewhere terrible. And for the most of us, maybe perhaps you won't commit adultery or fornication, but in the least instance, you will become desensitized, is the word. Desensitized. Your woman no longer looks as beautiful to you as she once did. Why? Because you've got a contrasting image in your head of what women should look like. Let's say you don't even watch porn. Forget porn. But you can't help but stare. And you look. And you're extending that stare. It's still having a similar impact on you. It's desensitizing your arousal levels. It's making you less masculine. It's a very unmasculine, or is that the word? Emasculate. Bismillah. It's a very unmasculating thing to not be able to get an erection. No cap. Right? So with that being the case, doesn't it make sense to safeguard yourself, protect yourself from all of those different doors that could lead towards you struggling with your arousal levels? Doesn't that make sense? It's like with alcohol. What does Allah say about alcohol in the Quran? There's some benefit in alcohol. There is some good in alcohol. Allah says this. He acknowledges this. There is some good in it. A glass of wine a day is good for your health. The problem with alcohol is that it has more harm than good. Therefore, he prohibited it completely in its entirety. Equally, I say, with looking at members of the opposite sex. Perhaps, I don't know, maybe you feel like one day you need to increase your arousal levels by looking at another woman. And then you go to your woman. I mean, that whole mindset is so flawed in the first place. But regardless, you're thinking it's harmless. Let me just look at her and, get it going down below and then I'll go to my wife. And you're thinking that's harmless. No. Where could that lead to? It doesn't just stop there. The heroin user doesn't just take one shot and never comes back ever again. No, he comes back again and again and again. And worse than that is that now he needs a bigger dose to get the same hit. It's the same with this discussion here. Looking at women in the street randomly eventually is not going to do it for you. Now, that's not arousing you. What's the next level? Porn. That's the next level. And then you start off with the soft porn. You spend time on that for a little period of time and everything's good and, it feels nice and so on. Now soft porn's not enough. What's next? Hardcore porn. You go to the hardcore porn. You spend some time there, and eventually, even that's not doing it for you. Where do you go next? Well, God knows. Bestiality? Maybe. Where do these things come from in the first place? Things like bestiality. It's because people have exhausted so many different means of corruption that they're now going to the point of being physically intimate with a goat or a flipping horse or a dog sometimes. And it all started from a seedling, from a tiny seed, usually connected to not lowering your gaze. So, gentlemen in particular, Allah addressed the women in the Quran as well. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ. Same thing. And tell the believing women, lower their gaze as well. Same thing. But he addressed the men first. Why? Because we're the ones who struggle with this. Me and you, akhi. We're the ones who really struggle with lowering our gaze. Women are beauty objects to us. We love their beauty. And it's a test. But I am telling you, put the religious aspect to the side. Looking at women that you shouldn't be looking at, prolonging that gaze, raping them with your eyes. Let's be frank here, gentlemen. That is emasculating you. It is causing you to be a less masculine man. It's desensitizing you down below. Desensitizing your arousal levels, your ability to be aroused naturally by your wife if you're married. So be careful, because it has repercussions. Allah is most wise. He's most wise. And I've tried to not make this a religious speech, because firstly and foremostly, I'm not someone who's qualified to make this a religious speech. But furthermore, I want to appeal to the larger audience, and that is Muslim or non-Muslim. Looking at members of the opposite sex desensitizes you, increases your arousal level, and if you're a gentleman, makes you less of a man. Can lead to problems down below with your Johnson, erectile dysfunction and so forth.